the last concept which we have to learn in object-oriented programming, which is a very practical concept, that is composition or has a relationship. We already saw an is a relationship with inheritance. Now, what is a has a relationship? For example, we saw a vehicle. So class car extends vehicle. Car is a vehicle. But within car, we could also have engine and tires and other parts, right? And those things are the ones which we can say that that car has an engine. A car has tires. That kind of a relationship is composition. So how would we define that a car has an engine, etc.? We can define that using container classes, which is a class within a class. So we could have nested classes and even nested interfaces in this way. So for that, I created a new class called composition, and here again we would just write our main method. Now over here, let's create the same class vehicle, and since we are using these within our package, let me just create the name to be something else. And now another class which is car would extend this vehicle, and this would be called car 3. Now this is an is relationship because car is a vehicle. Now car would also have an engine, right? So we could create a new class called engine, and in this we could have let's say integer cc and many other things, but let's just keep it over here now. So this is actually a composition. So car has an engine, and this is how a has a relationship is created. And remember that we always give priority over composition over inheritance. So composition is much better to handle than inheritance, because we could define all the classes which are a part of this class, and we could define the other methods instead of a car extending from an engine class and then overriding the cc and other values, right? So that is not something which we try to do. We generally try to have an as a relationship always whenever it is feasible. Now similarly, we could have an interface, and this would also be having a nested entity within it. So I'll just create an interface I which would have another interface j within it, and this would have other things. So this is how we could have nested interfaces. We could have nested classes. We could have inheritance out here. And this is the beauty of object-oriented programming, by helping us understand all the relationships between different objects and how data is flowing, how data is actually accessed by various ways, and how the access can be stopped from any places which we do not want, and many other things. So let's now go ahead and actually discuss about all the various glories of object-oriented programming with all the concepts which we have learned till now. Now, once we understood so many concepts and so many ways of programming in Java, let's now discuss about the main crux of object-oriented programming, the main concepts, and how these concepts are actually translated with Java concepts which we have studied in this particular module. So we will discuss about abstraction, encapsulation. We would also discuss about polymorphism, and we have also seen so much about inheritance as well, right? And lastly, we really understood so much about message passing as well. So let's discuss about each of them one by one. Now, what about abstraction? What abstraction says is that you hide the implementation details, you only show the functionality to the user. As I gave you an example of the switch and the fan. We saw how abstraction is actually implemented using abstract classes, abstract methods, and interfaces as well. Now, if you think, what is a class? A class is just a blueprint of an object. It is just an idea of an object. It is not until we create an object do we have actually a live implementation of that class residing in the computer memory, which we can actually, set some information and retrieve some information from. So the class is just an abstract idea of an object. This is how we actually implement abstraction in Java as well. Now coming to encapsulation. I told you when I was talking about class, what is a class? It is simply a capsule of all the variables and all the methods which are working on those variables. That is truly what is encapsulation. And especially, when we consider a special type of class, which we call as Java Bean class, that is a fully encapsulated class. Now consider this class which we wrote. This class vehicle has all these variables and it only has getters and setters for the variables. That's it. This class can be called as a Java Bean class. Technically, a Java Bean class should implement the serializable interface of Java and Java I/O, but we will look at this in the next module. For now, you need to know that this type of a class which would have, a single constructor. So we could create a constructor out here, which is just the default constructor. That's it. And which would have, these variables and especially all the getters and setters for the variables. Okay. Now this really is encapsulating all this information, and this really becomes a capsule of an object, and which is just giving us the ways of getting or setting the variables. And this is how encapsulation is implemented in Java. So we use getters and setters, which would make the class read only or write only. So if you just want a class to be read only, we only have getters. If you want the class to be write only, we could only have setters. Now this really gives a good data hiding possibility. Now what is data hiding? For example, I told you that certain variables have scope only within methods. Those are known as local variables of methods, right? If I try to access those variables from outside the methods, then they do not have scope. So what we are essentially doing is that in a particular method, we have all these different variables of some names, and we are hiding that from any other code which is outside that method, right? Because of this, we could have, variables of same name within different methods as well. So we could have a method A with a variable A, and we could have a method B with again a variable named A, and both of them would not clash with each other just because we have this sense of data hiding, which is hiding all those variables from outside world and actually working on those private local variables only, right? Similarly, by having the variables hidden inside the class and only allowing the outside world to be accessing those variables through some getters and setters only, that gives a good possibility of data hiding, and that's how encapsulation works. This also helps us in doing easy testing with our code, because we definitely know that the variables are not accessible outside the class. They are only accessible through only these ways. So we only need to be concerned about those methods and those testing ways. When we talk about object-oriented programming, we talk about how good it is for the design and development of softwares, right? Two of the concepts of object-oriented programming really to help us understand what a good design would be. And those are coupling and cohesion. So what is cohesion? Cohesion actually determines what a class can do. So for example, you have a class known as staff, and in that you are sending emails, you are checking their data, you are incrementing their salary, you are doing many things, okay? That really makes the class actually do many things, many broad things, and it would have many unfocused methods. It would, maybe check things within their departments, and maybe have some methods which are totally not related to staff at all, right? So that means low cohesion. So this class has low cohesion because it has some unfocused and broad methods. We do not really know the intent of the class, etc. But some class, if that class has a higher cohesion, means that it has focused working. It would only have those variables which are related to the class. So for example, the staff would have name, salary, email ID, etc. And it would have methods working on that: get email ID, set email ID, increment salary, all of that. But all the other details like, sending emails, checking finances, anything related to other department, all of that is not really going to help this class focus on its intent. So high cohesion is something which is desirable because that really helps the class focus on what the intention of the class is. The next thing is coupling. Coupling really determines, how related or dependent two classes are towards each other. So you would have loose coupling, meaning that, the two classes are not really dependent on each other and not really related to each other. So the code is in such a way that if you change anything in one class, it will not at all affect anything in the other class. that is loose coupling, and that is something which is desirable. On the other hand, if you have really tight coupling, two classes are very dependent on each other and they are very related to each other, then if you do make a change in one class, you would obviously have to make a lot of changes in the other class as well. That is a bad design. We do not want tight coupling. Okay, so a good software design means that classes should have high cohesion and low coupling. The next principle of object-oriented programming is polymorphism. What is the meaning of polymorphism? Polymorphism is a Greek word. Poly means many and morph means forms. So the idea is you could have many forms of a particular thing, and that should work perfectly fine in Java. Now, one type of polymorphism is something which you have already seen. Can you remember what is that something which has the same name but can have many forms? Any guess? Function overloading. So we have method overloading, right? We have the same name of the method, and then we have different variety of arguments going within it, and that's how we achieve polymorphism over there. That is something which is static binding or early binding, which we say. Why? Because in an early part of our development life cycle, what the compiler does is that it binds that particular function call to the function definition. That is known as compile time polymorphism, and an example for that is method overloading. For this, I created a new file called polymorphism, and in this I just created a new main, and we have a class called shape, and shape has a method called print, and this is going to simply give some output. And then we have overloading with print taking an integer a and print taking in a string s. You've seen something like this before. Now if I try to create an object of shape s equal to new shape, and now I try to call from s the method print. Now as I write print, it does not give any error because here compiler knows which print to call. Now let's say for example I pass in 5 and 3. Here there is an error coming, and it says the method print integer is in the type shape is not applicable for the arguments int, meaning that it should not accept two arguments which are int and int. It should either accept one integer argument or any other. Now think that it says the method print integer. That means it tried to bind it in the first method which it felt would be closest enough, because otherwise it would have just said print. It would have just said the method print and nothing in it to bind it to this particular version of print. But no, it actually tried to bind it. So whatever is happening right now is happening very early on. When I'm typing it, the IDE is telling me, or the compiler would tell me, as if I try to run this. Here we will have a compile time problem, a compilation problem. And here it would say the method print integer in the type shape is not applicable for the arguments int. So even if you are not really looking into what IDE is telling you, but the compiler would give you this type of an error. This is known as early binding. The compiler tries to bind the function call to the function definition. So I'll just comment this out. Another type of polymorphism is something known as dynamic binding or late binding. This is known as runtime polymorphism. So what happens is that you compile your entire program, but while running, your Java runtime environment is trying to run your code in the best ways in which you might have specified that, but that is not something which would be binded beforehand, okay? And that is something which we have seen using the concept of method overriding. That is also known as dynamic method dispatch. All these words are extremely important in the object-oriented programming terminologies. Hence, you should always remember what is the meaning of these words. Dynamic method dispatch is method overriding, meaning binding those method definitions to whether it is being called of the parent version or the child version. And that is happening dynamically on the runtime. That's why it's known as dynamic method dispatch. So here, we have our class circle, which is extending shape, and circle is a child of the shape class, and we have a constructor over here. So this is constructor of circle, and here we have the method print again, which is overriding the print method of the parent class. This is the method print of circle, and then we might probably have another method. So now here, if I call print method using the circle object, it would call this particular version of print. So let me create an object of circle C equal to new circle, and this is going to be C dot print, and let's see what it says. So first the constructor is called, and then you have a method print in circle. So let me just comment out the constructor for now. Now we see that we have method print in circle executed over here. Now one way we can really gain a lot of good benefit of polymorphism if we could actually create an object of a parent using the constructor of the child class. So here I would do shape S equal to new circle, and I would save this and just rename this particular object since we already have S over here. Now as you can see, there is no error coming, and if I just run this, this is running without any errors. Now if we try to run the print command, let's say from this object S1, so if we do S1.print and then I save this, let's just comment this earlier part out and let's run this. So now this would say method print in circle. So can you imagine that this is actually an object of the parent class, but it is initialized using the child class, and that's why it is returning the print method of the child class instead of the parent class. This is a dynamic binding or runtime polymorphism. So now this process of actually casting a child's object to the parent is known as upcasting. So I will just write over here upcasting. So what is happening is over here is that this actually is creating a child object, but you have assigned it to the parent, and now from the parent's object name you are able to call everything of the child just because you could assign the child to the parent. This is known as upcasting. Now you might be thinking this is a pretty complex thing. Why would we even need this? Something of that sort. So let's just consider an example that there is shape checker, let's say, and this shape checker would take in some shape and it would check the shape and do something with it. Okay, and now once the shape checker works, the shape checker would return something, all of that. Okay, so now if we have this type of a method, then what we want really is to be able to pass any object. So let's say you have a circle out here, but then you may even have a rectangle, let's say, and this would also extend shape, and this would also have, let's say, a print method. Okay, public void print, and this would say the same thing. Method print in rectangle. Now let's say you had this particular method. So let me just uncomment this and comment out this part, and we do a public void shape checker, which is taking a shape, this one, and now this is giving some error because we are inside a main, and I said that there cannot be a method within a method, so we'll just put that outside. Now this is the shape checker which is taking the shape and doing something with it. Now what we want to do is we want to call this shape checker using any particular object. So let's say we have this object C, and we want to pass this C in our shape checker. So we'll call this method from our main, and we want to pass C. So this has to be static just because we are calling it from static main. This is something which we already saw when we were discussing about static. And now as you can see, the shape checker gives no error even though a proper object of circle is passed to it. And the reason for that is because of this runtime polymorphism coming over here. So now for example, if we just do shape.print and let's try to run this. I'll just comment out this part and run this again. So now you can see that the print version of circle is called. What if we have a rectangle r equal to new rectangle? This is creating a new object of rectangle. Let's pass r over here. And let's try to run this now. Now as you can see, the print method of rectangle is called instead of circle. So can you see how flexible Java is? Even though we have any type of shape, we have a rectangle, we have circle, or we have any child class, but this particular method does not take each of them. In fact, it just takes the parent class and then, it does some things based on whatever object you are passing. So now you have all the flexibility to pass different child class objects as parent class, and then you are able to, call those methods of the parent class, and then you will be good to go. You will have everything of that child class itself just because of this runtime polymorphism. Now remember how this runtime polymorphism works. The child is actually upcasted to parent. Now if you really want to not have anything of the parent and just call something of the child specifically, for example, this another method is present in the child class. So even though I just put this another m over here and pass in the circle object and save this, still here it is going to give me an error that the method another m is undefined for the type shape. So remember that when we are actually upcasting, we are only going to use everything of the parent just so that we could have this kind of flexibility which I just showed to you. So this is how upcasting would work. Now there is another thing known as downcasting. So now what is downcasting? If you kind of logically understand what it is, upcasting is actually we are casting the child object to the parent. Downcasting would be to have a parent object casted to child. So you would have something like this. You have a circle which let's say is called not circle, and this is S1. So S1 is actually shape, right? But then it is initialized with the object of circle. So now what you could do is you could simply cast that using these round brackets of circle and then put that in another object of circle, and this will definitely work as you would expect. So let's say this is not circle dot print, and let's just comment this part out, and when I run this is going to print the one of circle itself. So there's no issue in downcasting as well. But remember that this type of upcasting is actually done implicitly. So implicitly your child object is casted to the parent. Downcasting, you have to do it explicitly. You actually have to put the round brackets and put that this should actually be casted to circle and going back. Now remember that if S1 was not defined like this using the child class constructor, then this would not work. So if you just have shape S equal to new shape and then you want to downcast it to the child object, and if we try to run this, here there is going to be an exception. What it would say is that class shape cannot be cast to class circle. Shape and circle are in unnamed module of loader app. So what it says is that your shape class object cannot be cast to circle. If only it would have been initialized using circle. If it was actually a circle object only, then you could have casted it. So this is how downcasting works. You define it in this way to get this kind of a flexibility, but now you really want to work with the circle object. And why is this so? Again, this is something a little complex, but then why do we have this type of a flexibility in Java? And the reason for that is, let's say you have a shape S2, and this is being returned from some method which returns specific shape. And now I just created this particular name just to show you the intent of what this method would do, but obviously this is not at all a nice way to name a method. So now this is some method which returns a specific shape. Now you don't know which shape is this. We don't know what it is returning or what shape it is returning. So we don't know that. We just know that it's returning some shape. Why not just, upcast it to shape object and then put that as S2. And then finally, let's say if it was a circle or if it was a rectangle, then we want to do something, right? So now what we would really want to do is we want to check if S2 is instance of circle, then we want to do this. Okay, then we want to actually downcast S2 to circle and then do whatever we want with a circle. Okay, so this is going to be our if block. Or if S2 is going to be a rectangle, then again, what we would want to do is we would want to downcast it to rectangle. So now I would just write it to be R1. This not circle is actually giving confusion. So this would be C2. Okay. So now this would be rectangle. Cast it for S2 and then we would just, do R1, let's say dot print. This is all we want to do. So now this is how we would use downcasting. This would be the reason why would we use downcasting. If we have, something returning a particular shape, we would just, put that in our parent and then, check if it is an instance of circle. If it is an instance of any particular child, then downcast it to that child and then start using that child object. Okay. Why would we do this S2 instance of circle? Let's say if it was not an instance of circle, let's say it was actually an instance of a rectangle, let's say. So this would give you an error. This part would give you an error. What error? This same error. Class so-and-so cannot be cast to class circle. If you tried to do this. Or if you tried to do this, if it was circle or if it was just, the parent shape, then again, this error would come that, class so-and-so cannot be cast to class rectangle. So this is how your upcasting and downcasting and polymorphism works in Java. Now, as you can see, it's a little complex, but it gives you so much of flexibility, and that's why Java language is so flexible and very nice to use, very nice to implement complex algorithms, complex ideas into code. So to make things easy, upcasting would mean that you have a parent A object name and equal to new child. So this is actually creating an object of a child, assigning it to a parent, and then let's say you work on that particular object. And downcasting would mean that you create an object of child and then taking an object of the parent, you're downcasting it by explicitly, putting the type to be child. Now A obviously has to be defined in this way, otherwise there would be an error. So also explain to you in what conditions you would want to use polymorphism in this manner. So that's it about polymorphism. Let's look at the last topic in our discussion of object-oriented programming in the next video.